I decided to meet my friends today. My friend Josh invited me to a restaurant to celebrate a momentous occasion. He's getting married, and at the same time to introduce me to his bride. To be honest, I didn't want to go. I didn't want to because I knew Josh's future wife very well, but that's only half the trouble. I also liked her a lot, but my friend beat me to it. And now it's already time for the wedding. Ethan. Finally thought you wouldn't show up again, Josh said, smiling and giving me a friendly slap on the back. I forced a smile, nodded, and sat down at the table, pretending I didn't care. Emily didn't pay any attention to me either. She was sitting next to Josh, laughing at something he said, and I couldn't help but notice how happy she looked. I poured myself some wine, brought some snacks closer, and the evening began. I wanted to get drunk at that moment because I couldn't bear watching Josh hugging Emily, and seeing her look at him with loving eyes made it worse. The thing is, we lived in the same neighborhood but in different buildings. I noticed her right away when she moved in, and I was instantly drawn to her. But she never paid any attention to me. I never had the guts to approach her, and now she's marrying my best friend. It felt like I was an ostrich hiding my head in the sand. I didn't want to fight with my best friend. We had been through so much together, so many years of friendship, laughter, and shared experiences. The party was in full swing, and everyone had already had a lot to drink. There were dirty jokes flying around, and the girls who were with us that night seemed to be enjoying the banter. My friend's fiancée Emily decided to go dancing, and I couldn't take my eyes off her. She was perfect, even in the way she moved on the dance floor. Inside me, everything exploded. I was ready to grab her and carry her far away. My imagination was drawing such vivid pictures in my head that I even started sweating, my heart pounding as I watched her. I couldn't stand it any longer. I got up and followed her, my mind clouded with emotions I couldn't control. There was no one around near the restrooms, and she must have gone inside. I leaned against the door and waited for her to come out, my pulse racing. Finally, the lock clicked, and she stepped out. At that moment, I realized I couldn't control myself. "Emily," I drunkenly mumbled, my voice shaky. She looked at me with confusion, and before I could think twice, I reached out and pulled her towards me. I started kissing her, holding her arm so she wouldn't push me away. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. For a moment, I thought she would push me away and scream, but then I felt her relax. Her resistance melted away, and I could feel her responding to me. I was thrown into a fever, the heat of the moment consuming me entirely. Seeing that she was responding without resistance only fueled my desire, and I lost myself in the intensity of it all. After what felt like half an hour, when everything was over, we both looked at each other, breathless and filled with a mix of emotions: guilt, desire, confusion. We both knew what we had done, and the weight of it hung heavy in the air. Emily looked away, biting her lip, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. Part of me wanted to say something, to apologize, or maybe to confess my feelings, but I couldn't find the words. I knew one thing for sure: I really wanted to be with Emily, even if it meant losing a friend. The thought of losing Josh, who had always been like a brother to me, made my stomach turn, but the pull I felt towards Emily was undeniable. I had never felt anything so intense, and now that I knew she felt something too, I couldn't just walk away. We returned to the table separately, trying to act like nothing had happened. Josh was still laughing with our friends, completely unaware of what had just transpired. I sat down, my mind racing, and poured myself another glass of wine. Emily sat next to Josh, her face flushed, and avoided looking at me. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, and I could hardly focus on the conversations around me. All I could think about was what had just happened and what it meant for the future. As the night drew on, I found myself lost in a haze of conflicting emotions. Josh was completely oblivious to the turmoil raging inside me. He kept on with his jokes and laughter, and every time he looked at Emily, his eyes sparkled with love. It made me feel like the worst person in the world. But even with the guilt gnawing at me, I couldn't ignore what had happened between Emily and me. I couldn't pretend that it didn't mean anything. There was something there, something real, and now that I knew it, I couldn't forget it. After the restaurant, some of us decided to continue the celebration at Josh's apartment. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go, but I also didn't want to be alone with my thoughts. The idea of sitting in my empty apartment, replaying everything that happened over and over again, terrified me. So I tagged along. The group made our way to Josh's place, and we continued drinking and talking. though I couldn't participate with much enthusiasm. My mind kept drifting back to Emily, who was sitting across the room, avoiding eye contact with me. At one point, Josh got up to get more drinks, and for a moment, Emily and I were left alone. The room was filled with chatter and laughter, but it felt like a bubble had formed around us. I caught her eye, and she looked at me with a mixture of longing and fear. I opened my mouth to say something, but before I could speak, Josh returned, breaking the moment. Emily quickly looked away, and I was left with my words hanging in the air, unspoken. As the night wore on, people started leaving, and soon it was just me, Josh, and Emily. Josh was clearly drunk, his words slurring as he kept talking about the wedding. He was so happy, so genuinely excited about his future with Emily, and it made my heart ache. I felt like I was betraying him just by being there. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't bring myself to stand up and walk out. Emily was sitting next to him, her face a mask of conflicted emotions, and I knew she was feeling the weight of it all too. Finally, it was time to leave. Josh stumbled to his feet, giving me a sloppy hug before turning to Emily. "I'll see you tomorrow, babe," he said, his voice thick with affection. Emily smiled weakly, and I could see the strain in her eyes. She walked me to the door, and for a moment we were alone again. I looked at her, wanting to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just nodded, and she did the same. I walked out into the cool night air, my heart heavy. I knew things couldn't stay the way they were. Something had to change, but I didn't know how to make it happen. All I knew was that I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay, not when everything inside me was screaming otherwise. The next day, I woke up with a pounding headache, the events of the previous night playing in my mind like a broken record. I knew I had to talk to Emily. I couldn't just let things hang in the air between us. I needed to know what she was feeling, what she wanted. I needed to know if there was any chance for us, or if what happened was just a mistake that we both needed to forget. I picked up my phone, my hand trembling slightly as I typed out a message. "Hey, can we talk?" I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the send button. My heart was pounding in my chest, fear and hope battling inside me. Finally, I pressed send, and the message went through. I put my phone down, my heart racing as I waited for a response. Minutes felt like hours as I waited, each second stretching out endlessly. Finally, my phone buzzed and I picked it up with shaky hands. "Okay, meet me at the park." In an hour, I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. I had no idea what she was going to say, but at least we were going to talk. At least we could finally face what had happened, and maybe, just maybe, figure out where to go from here. Like the story? Support with a like and subscribe for new stories.